Okay, so let's talk about independent and dependent clauses. An independent clause is a group of words, has a subject, and it has a verb. So when you're looking at your subjects and verbs here in this sentence, Jim studied in the sweet shop for his chemistry quiz. Who or what is the sentence about? That would be Jim. And what did he do? He studied would be your verb. So that would be your subject verb, and so because you have both of those, you have a complete independent clause. An independent clause could just be Jim studied and not even have any of the rest of that, just Jim studied. That's a complete sentence. That is an independent clause. Now, when we look at your dependent clause is a little different. A dependent clause has words that I call the awubuses. And in this case, their awubus is when. When Jim studied in the sweet shop for his chemistry quiz. What happened when he studied, the thought is incomplete. We don't know what happened. There needs to be something else in this spot. So the marker word, which they call it on this website, or the awubus, is the when. When Jim studied, if we didn't have anything else, just when Jim studied, that is a dependent clause, is an incomplete sentence. So that's what makes it a little bit different from the sentence above it, which is Jim studied. So when we look at what are our awubuses, let's take a look at those. The following are your awubuses. These are words that signal your brain to say that is a dependent clause. As, although, after, while, when, unless, because, before, if, since. Those are the most commonly used words to indicate a dependent clause. There are others, but those are the most common. Examples of dependent clauses that start with an awubus are as follows. So take a few minutes and read all of these to yourself. Those are all dependent clauses. If you needed more time, feel free to rewind slightly and pause. So if we're looking at these dependent clauses in sentence form, as the day ended, the family was gathered around, and here's where I'm at if you're wondering, as the day ended, the family was gathered around the dinner table. Your dependent clause, as the day ended, there should be a comma, and that comma indicates to you that there's a break, and then you would have the family gathered around the table. Dependent clause, independent clause. Although I tried to hurry, that would be your dependent clause because you have an awubus. Independent clause. I didn't make it to class before the bell. I barely even have to read the second half of the sentence. Now, you will need to read the second half of the sentence because you're newer to this, but over time you'll be able to do it. Now, after is a tricky one because after could be a prepositional phrase. After the game was over. The game, and what did the game do? Because that's our subject. What did the game do? It was over. So because there is a subject and verb after the awubus, that tells us a dependent clause. We went, subject verb, that would be your independent clause. So both sides, both clauses must have a subject and must have a verb. Okay, and so then the third type of connector or conjunction you'll need to be aware of are your fanboys, which you have learned before. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So these are your fanboys. These connect two independent clauses. So there's a subject and verb on each side of those fanboys. With that subject and verb, it is an independent clause. There's usually a comma between them. Okay? So you have to have subjects and verbs on both sides. This could look a couple different ways. So here are some sample sentences. Let's start with number 1. We have Pauline and Bruno have a big argument every summer over where they should spend their summer vacation. Okay, so we have Pauline and Bruno because we know who is it about, subjects. They have, they should. So we have two subjects, two verbs. It means we have two clauses. Now, even though where is not one of our awubuses, where is what we call kind of a hidden awubus is how I teach it. So there's a collection of those hidden awubuses that we'll review here in just a moment. that indicate a second clause. They just do not require a comma. Awubuses do require a comma. So Pauline and Bruno have, they should. So we have our independent clause first and our dependent clause second. Pauline loves to go to the beach and spend her days sunbathing. So we have Pauline loves, and what else does she do? Spend. We have what we might think is a fanboy here. However, we have no subject after. If we had the word and she spends her days sunbathing, then we'd have two independent clauses, but we don't have she. That's not there. So it's all one independent clause. Let's look at the next one. Bruno, on the other hand, likes the view that he gets from the log cabin up in the mountains, and he enjoys hiking in the forest. So we have Bruno likes. On the other hand, we just ignore. The view that he gets from the log cabin, up in the mountains, all is just prepositional phrases, so we don't need that. We have that, which is one of our hidden awubuses, one of our relative, not one of our relative, but it's one of our hidden awubuses. Our subject, he, and our verb, gets. And then we have a fanboy, he enjoys. That's our verb. So we have three clauses here, three subjects, three verbs. So we have independent clause, then we have the word that, which is our dependent clause, and then we have another independent clause. Okay, so let's look at those hidden awubuses. The most common relative pronouns are who and whom, whoever, whomever, whose, that, and which. Those are words that are worth committing to memory. Okay? So that relative pronouns introduce relative clauses, which are a type of dependent clause. So they're dependent clauses. They very rarely have commas. Sometimes they do in the example below because it's kind of inserted in the middle of the sentence. The word, phrase, or idea modified is called the antecedent, and that would be what they're talking about. So the house that Jack built is large. So we have that Jack built is our dependent clause. It's talking about the house. The house is our subject. Is my verb. And my independent clause is everything that I've underlined in red. My dependent clause is the highlighted portion. So it's like the dependent clause fits inside the independent clause. So we have both here, IC and a DC. The professor, whom I respect, recently received tenure. The professor recently received tenure is my independent clause. Whom I respect is my dependent clause. So that is how relative pronouns work. I encourage you to use the other resources provided on the website and on Edmodo to help you understand it further, or call me over today in class and we'll sit down and practice together.